Well, welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Tanner Bryan. I'm a senior partner here at Action Coach in Central Texas, and I am joined by Katie Kam, who is the CEO and co-founder of BioBQ. Very excited to be jumping into some conversation here. Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me, being willing to go through some of the questions I love to ask and just hear about your journey and everything that's going on over at BioBQ. So, first off, thank you. Second, I'd love to just kind of hand it over to you just for a couple minutes here. If you would give us just kind of a general background of or overview of you and tell us a little bit about what is BioBQ.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Katie Kam, and a little bit of background on me is where do I start? Grew up in Austin, Texas, and I'll get into this when I describe BioBQ, but everyone knows Austin is like a popular barbecue place. I worked there. I worked at a barbecue restaurant in high school, a little bit in college. That was, one of my favorite foods. And then in college, I decided to become vegetarian for all the reasons, health, environmental, and animal welfare. And then about 10 years later, I decided to become vegan. And that was like a lifestyle diet choice. But then I recently decided to make it a career choice to try to affect change in the food production system. So a little bit of my background, I have degrees in biology and chemistry. So I definitely have a love for that subject matter that is helpful for this pursuit of cultured meat, which is what my company is doing. And then I also have master's and PhD in engineering. So I've been using those to have my own engineering consulting business for a few years. So I've had this entrepreneurial spirit and previous entrepreneurial endeavors that I'm bringing to this. And I can jump into BioBQ.
Yeah, please tell us a little bit about
Okay.
BioBQ.
Sure. So it's kind of like this confluence of my interests in science and engineering and background in it, and then my veganism, where I realized being in Texas, like family and friends when we go to barbecue restaurants, I was like, well, I'm not eating barbecue anymore. So then when I started hearing about cultured meat and like 2010, 2011, right around there. And then it became super popular in 2013 because that's when it got highly publicized that there was this scientist in the Netherlands that cultured the first hamburger meat, that I was like, oh, that's the win-win solution. That's the way for people that love meat to get their meat without all of the negative impacts and associations that comes with slaughtering animals for meat. So I was like, okay, I definitely want to work on that. And so in December of 2018, I founded BioBQ. And then I spent the next year going to conferences and diving into the literature on, what's been studied and tried. And then I met Dr. Janet Zolden, who is a biomedical engineering professor at UT. And she brought on some technology and experience with cell culture that was incorporated into BioBQ's R&D. And so, yeah, we've been working on it for the last 4 years. And we've developed 2 prototypes that we affectionately refer to as brisket bites. So our first product is beef brisket. We're more interested in culturing meat that are whole cuts of meat. So we're not making ground meats. We're making whole cuts of meat like beef brisket, ribs, steak, that type of thing. And just a little bit of background on the process. What we do is we get a very small biopsy of muscle and fat cells from cattle here in Central Texas. We take that back to the lab, we extract the muscle and fat stem cells from that, and then we just keep growing the cells and giving them cell culture media that keeps them happy. And then we get enough muscle and fat cells to actually create these prototypes that can be taste tested and consumed.
That is so cool, and I appreciate you going through and kind of explaining that a little bit deeper, because I was going to ask about that for those that are not familiar with cultured meat and kind of that process and what that looks like. So been in business for 4 years, right? Since 2018, officially getting kicked off. Now into having a couple prototypes. Maybe let's take a step back before we kind of dive into kind of some of the things that have been going on in the last 4 years or so. So immediately before starting BioBQ, did you have additional jobs before that? Kind of what was the journey leading up before you kind of made that leap of saying, let's go ahead and found a company and start something brand new? What was the journey like prior to that in terms of kind of work and career life?
Yeah. So what I really like about this role as CEO of BioBQ is it's really like this great culmination of all my past education and work experience. So, for example, I mentioned I got degrees in biology and chemistry. Well, I use this to work in a couple of biology labs, and then I also was a high school science teacher, where I got to work with many students on experiments, and that's definitely a role I continue in now. Helping interns and scientists, work through some of the R&D plans that we have. So that's great. And then, yeah, and then I also was for a while an urban planner. So I have also a master's in community regional planning, and that really helped give me a very comprehensive view of sustainability. And in the role as planner, I worked a lot on regulatory issues. So that gave me a comfort level with, when you have a development project or you want to change code or something, like what the process is for that. And certainly with culture meat, we're going to have to go through a regulatory process. So that's something I'm very comfortable and excited to go through. And then also, yeah, as I mentioned, I have my own engineering consulting business I started before I started BioBQ. And that's the experience of, working with clients and getting the projects done, and, understanding that, engineering requires time and design and budgeting, and taking all of that into consideration. So that's why I feel like this role is just like, I get to bring everything in, like from science education to engineering to, going through regulatory processes and thinking comprehensively about sustainability. That's just like been describing my life the last 25 years. And I'm bringing that all together in this role.
That is so cool. I don't know that I've ever been think on it. I don't think so. I don't think I've met anyone that has been, in urban planning and has gone on and done the type of work that you're doing today,
Mhm.
which is really, really cool. And I had never thought about it in the context of the regulatory things that you would go through in urban planning and how that will have some crossover in your current industry, which is again really cool.
Mhm.
And I can definitely appreciate being able to pull that experience into the role today. Um, so I always like to ask, as you made this transition from really working for others, right, and starting a company of your own,
Mhm.
what was that transition like for you? Was this did it come out of necessity, or was it you just really wanted to have your own company that was yours that you could run, or was it more of a there really isn't an alternate opportunity for you to do this type of work, you know underneath something that already existed? Tell me a little bit about how that transition really took place for you.
Yeah. So, I'll answer that question for both businesses. So the first business I started was for the engineering consulting business. And that was definitely motivated by feeling like I was ready to break out on my own and offer engineering consulting services, and also motivated by a desire to, I knew I kind of wanted to go a direction that was unique compared to other engineering firms. And in particular, I was really, still am, really interested in sustainable transportation and rethinking our transportation system in terms of what we use to get around. And so I was able to carve out um, have a niche and working in that space. And I got some excellent projects to work on that would not have necessarily been an option if I had just stayed plugged into an existing engineering firm. So it was very much motivated by wanting to kind of step out into a leadership role, into a new space, and to create a business around that. So that was part of the reason. And then I also, for the more traditional civil engineering, I was looking forward to, managing the projects and, shepherding them through from design through regulatory approval. So I felt like I had enough experience under my belt to do that. So that was the engineering consulting business. what's super interesting about having started engineering consulting business and then following it up soon after, which is crazy. I've had 2 businesses to operate the last few years. I've made it work, but it's been very long hours. The reason I can do that is because I'm super passionate about both projects. And, I'm winding down the engineering consulting business to completely focus on BioBQ, but there has been this period of time with overlap necessarily, because unlike engineering consulting, where you just kind of show up in the market and go, I've got services, I can offer services and you get the projects. With BioBQ, it's completely different. I'm having to go write grants and ask investors for funding this, and I don't have a product yet, right? So they're just funding the R&D at this stage, with the expectation that we will produce a product that would go to market. So it's been really fascinating to experience starting up 2 very different types of businesses and what it's like. And yeah, for wanting to start BioBQ, to go back to your original question, it was very much motivated by, one, there's no other culture meat company in Texas. I didn't want to, I actually originally thought I would go back to school to get a second PhD in biomedical engineering and have my dissertation be the basis of technology for a culture meat company. And then my co-founder convinced me not to go get a second PhD, but she could bring me in as a postdoc and I could learn, cell culture and tissue engineering in that way. And I got a little bit of that in before the pandemic shut everything down, but yeah, that worked out. And so, yeah, it was just nothing in Austin, nothing in Texas. And I didn't want to move, to San Francisco or, where some of the culture meat companies were. I felt like starting a culture meat company in Texas was a solid business decision. Like, it's just like, definitely should create cultured barbecue meats here. I think it's going to be, once I get the product to market, I think people are going to be standing in line for it for sure. So yeah, I think that's just, I was like, again, wanting to step out and be a leader in a space. And that's why I chose to establish BioBQ.
I love that. So as you look back on really just the past 4-ish years, if we take, we could really look at both your journey between both businesses at this point. I've yet to, encounter an entrepreneur that tells me that from day one to where they are today has always been a straight, perfect, always easy line. There's almost always some ups and some downs that happen along the journey. So I'm curious for you, as you kind of reflect back on your journey in business ownership and entrepreneurship specifically, is there we'll say a memorable roadblock or hurdle that you've come up against and had to overcome, in business that's helped you become the CEO and the business owner that you are today?
Oh, yes. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is going back to fundraising for a startup like BioBQ. That is quite an experience to just deal with a lot of rejection. And it's, you feel like you've got a solid business plan and a product, and you're constantly making progress on the R&D, and you're bootstrapping it, and you're not giving up. I'm showing initiative, showing persistence, and I know that I bring an energy and passion to it that will help the company grow. And it's this frustration that, like, the investors aren't seeing that. They're seeing, oh, you don't have a product yet. We're not interested in investing in something where you don't have a product to go to market. Like, it's trying to find the investors that see that energy and that vision and knowing, okay, this is early stage. We still have to go through R&D, but I can tell that this person wants to make this happen. Like, they've committed themselves to it in every way, time, financial, learning as much as possible, reaching out, creating a network of people. And so I guess for me, I've learned through that experience of just being like, hey, why don't you see this and the potential and where this could go? I mean, this is a product that will fundamentally change the course of humanity and how we get our food and our meats. Like, this is like a big deal. It's not like an app for a phone that may last for a few years. Like this is something big. And then just, having to go through these pitches and then getting the no afterwards. And I'm just like, what? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. But so what I found about myself through this process is like, okay, next, talk to the next investor, keep going, just keep going. Don't give up. You'll eventually find, just keep that in mind. And it really helps also. So one stat that I keep in mind, not to like have a pity party, but more to keep in mind as inspiration, is female founded companies that are VC backed, only 1.9% of VC funding goes to female founded companies. And I've talked to some female investor or founders that they had to talk to 347. One had to talk to 347 investors before she could actually find funding for her company. She finally did. It's a hugely successful company. And so it's just, meeting other female founders that can like inspire you, just like, don't give up, just keep going, keep talking to people. And so it's been actually really nice to see that I knew this about myself already, but to just know that it's in action in real time, like, yep, okay, you said no, all right. I'm going on to the next one. So yeah.
That is that is empowering, and I appreciate you sharing kind of the statistic and such as well. And it's fascinating to me. So as you look at that, was there anything that stands out in your mind as to why, for you specifically, you were able to just make that decision of, we're going to keep going. Rejection after rejection. It gets hard. It gets stressful. I imagine. Is it a product of kind of your life so far? Was it just a decision that you made? Kind of what for you allowed you to get to that point of saying, we're just going to keep going and keep grinding, and we're going to get to the point where this is going to move forward and work for us?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It really comes down to what my business is doing. And I feel very strongly that we're not going to, not everyone's going to become vegan. We can't get 100% of the world's population to become vegan. There are many people that like to eat meat. And so, again, going back to this idea that cultured meat is a win-win solution for this. It's like the people that want the meat get the meat, and the people that don't want the animal welfare issues and the environmental impacts, or, there's also concerns about the mental health of slaughterhouse workers. Their job is to just kill things all day long. Like that comes with mental health implications. So it's just all these negative things associated around the animal agricultural space goes away completely by transitioning meat to cultured meat. And that alone is just enough to, I wake up and go, all right, keep working towards that.
I love that. And that, I wrote down a question earlier that I think now is a perfect time to kind of ask is, because you're so passionate about the industry that you're in and the work that y'all are working towards at this point, what do you believe is the biggest impact that cultured meat and BioBQ can have on our society, on heck, even the world, as you continue to do the work that y'all are doing?
So what do we think our impact is going to be, or would like it to be?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of both.
Okay.
Whichever
Okay.
is the easier one to kind of articulate and explore through.
Yeah. So, I definitely envisioned BioBQ being a leader in the cultured meat space, initially in Texas, and then growing from there, and eventually becoming a global producer of cultured meat. But I don't want it, again, kind of going back to my sustainable transportation background, I don't want this to be about having, major facilities here in Texas and like shipping the meat out. The idea, because the cool thing about cultured meat is you're not having these ranches in the panhandle, or concentrated animal feed operations in the panhandle, ranchers everywhere. Like you don't need that space, you don't need to be dispersed. And so the idea is to create the cultured meat in the city where the consumer demand is. And so I envision BioBQ having facilities in all the major cities. And so that way you minimize, the transportation footprint of like, okay, the cultured meat is going to be made in the city, let's say in Austin, and then it's going to be distributed to the barbecue restaurants and grocery stores in Austin. There'll be another facility in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, same thing. And then spreading from there to other states. So that's kind of the geographic growth I expect for BioBQ. And so I see the impact being of not only just with food, but also with transportation, and it just starting to also change society in a way of, kind of similar to like a favorite analogy that's brought up in like the culture meat space is like we used to hunt whales for whale oil. We used to use horses to get around town. There's all these things that we used to do that relied heavily on animals. But with technological progress, we remove the animal and the animal is no longer like a slave to whatever we want done. And so I see BioBQ as part of that movement to finally remove animals from the food system. And we finally have the technology to be able to do that.
It's fantastic. Absolutely love it. I know there's 100 things that we could dive into on kind of the power behind what y'all are doing, and unfortunately, we don't have the time for that today. But I will ask kind of one additional question on we'll say the business, but even just the industry of culture meats in general. Knowing that it's we'll call it newer, or at least less known among overall general public or population in general. What is one thing that you wish more people knew about cultured meat?
Oh, I really like that question. It's really interesting bringing up cultured meat in conversation with people. Some people think it's like a version of like Beyond Meat or Impossible Burger, which are plant-based ground meats, and it's not that. So I have to kind of change that misperception of what it is. There's also some people that will joke, it's like, oh, it's Franken meat, or, it's like a GMO, or, it's just, they don't quite grasp exactly what we're doing. And so I find that just explaining like all we're doing is just taking some cells from an animal, and we know how to keep those cells alive outside of the animal so that we can continue to get the muscle and fat without having to slaughter the animal. But yeah, there's definitely and there's a couple nonprofits that are working on educating the public about what cultured meat is and why we would want to even pursue this technology. One's called Good Food Institute and the other one's called New Harvest. And both of them have websites that are super helpful in trying to help understand the science and engineering behind cultured meat. But I would say for the most part, there'll be people that maybe have some misconception about it at first, but overall, people are like excited about this. They want to try it. They tell me, oh yeah, this makes sense. And like a lot of people, I call them, they're kind of like self-professed like guilty meat eaters, right? They're people that love meat, but they hate the guilt that they feel associated with, well, I don't want the animal to die, or I don't want to be contributing to global warming with my meat. Like there's just a lot of those people that I meet. And so they're excited about this possibility of cultured meat coming onto the market so that they can eat meat without the guilt. And so, yeah, but definitely there'll have to be an education component. And interestingly, a couple of facilities have already been built for ground meats, not for culture or like structured meats like we're doing, but they intentionally built it with glass walls so people can actually see the process and see what's actually behind making the meat.
Oh, that's so cool. Which brought another question that I've got to ask because I'm so curious. So time, how long does it take from like biopsy to even at the point where now you've got a couple of prototypes, but what is that when you look at the process of creating these from time of biopsy to time of being edible, let's say, or having the final product? What does that look like? What is that time frame between start to finish?
Yeah, so that time frame is best to be broken up in like two phases. So the first phase is like from the biopsy to when there's enough cells for us to harvest to then transfer over to our process to actually make the beef brisket. So from biopsy to when we have enough cells, that can take a while. Let's say it varies, but we'll say, and especially varies depending on how many cells you need, but let's say about 2.5 to 3 months. And the reason that takes a little bit longer is you've taken cells out of a body and they're just kind of like, what just happened here? Like they're a little disoriented. So there's like this little bit of a slow growth that happens. And then they start getting used to their new environment and then they start to take off. And then that's when we start to see a lot of cells being grown. And then once we have enough cells, then we can take those cells and move them over to the process to actually make the whole cuts of meat. So we have to get the cells to grow in a certain way so that we have the components, we call them the muscle bundles, to form the distinctive meat grain and brisket. And that itself, we found in the lab, takes only like 3 weeks. So from like when we have enough cells to harvest to a final product, we're seeing about 3 weeks.
Amazing.
Which is like, we don't have to wait for a cow to grow for like for a year.
Yeah, man, that is so fascinating. And I really could just sit here and ask you questions like all day long because I find it so interesting. And I know we don't have that kind of time. So I do want to be, respectful of the time. And I always like to, round out these conversations on one kind of very specific question. But before I jump into that, Katie, where can the audience go to find out a little bit more information, to follow the work that y'all are doing, to connect with you specifically? Where can we have the audience go for more information?
Yeah, so for BioBQ in general, I mostly keep people up to date on LinkedIn. So if you look up BioBQ on LinkedIn, that's where I'll post updates, as well as following me on LinkedIn. I do have a website, but it's more of just kind of an intro website, just a landing page of sorts. So that's at biobqing.com. So it's biobqing.com. And then for keeping just like up to date on cultured meat in general, the 2 nonprofits I mentioned are excellent resources for that. So that would be Good Food Institute and New Harvest.
Beautiful. For those that are watching, I will be putting all of this in the description of the video below. So make sure that once we wrap up here today, go click the links, go make sure that you follow Katie on LinkedIn, connect, say hi, all of that kind of stuff. Let her know that you saw her here on this in this video. So Katie, as we wrap up, I always like to finish off with this final question. What is most inspiring to you today?
Okay. What is most inspiring is that I am not the only one that wants to see this type of change. And so I've been so excited to meet other people in this space and also just in general wanting to make the world better. I really enjoy being in that crowd, at conferences or just, having video chats. And so it's inspiring to know that I'm not alone in this journey. It's also inspiring that people come to me, like professionals and students, being like, I love what BioBQ is doing. I want to help in some way. And so that just is another reason I just keep going, knowing that I'm moving forward, knowing I've got, people that are on board too.
Amazing. Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today, hearing the story, hearing all the work that y'all are doing. Very excited to one day get to try out some of the product. So thank you so much for being here. It has truly been a pleasure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.